Hi, my name's Isaac Shutt. I'm an estate planning attorney. I'm licensed to practice law both in Texas and in Wyoming. Now, a lot of our clients either are interested in establishing a revocable living trust, or they are sometimes the beneficiary or named trustee of a revocable living trust. And so there are some really common questions that come across my desk relating to trusts in Texas, although I feel like these probably apply in most states. But anyway, I have 3 videos where I'm going to talk about the 3 roles of a trust. So this one is about what the trustee does. And then in 2 other videos, I'll talk about the settlor and also the beneficiary. So what is a trustee? What are the responsibilities of a trustee in a revocable living trust? Well, the trustee is the person in charge of managing the assets of a trust, and that has to be done for the benefit of the beneficiary. So the trustee oftentimes is, to begin with, the person who initially created the trust, but then if that person passes away or becomes incapacitated, that successor trustee will take over the management of the assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries. Now, when you're thinking about who to name as a trustee, you need to keep these responsibilities in mind of a trustee, because the trustee is in charge of investing the assets and then also making distributions for the beneficiaries. And then also they're in charge of dealing with any bill paying. So if there are debts or bills that need to be paid on an ongoing basis, including taxes, that will be the responsibility of the trustee. So I keep using the word responsibility, and that's because it is a lot of responsibility. When you're thinking about who you might name as a trustee in your document, keep that in mind. This person needs to have some sort of responsibility and skill, and needs to be savvy and needs to be trustworthy. So let me give you a quick example. It's not enough for a trustee to simply not steal from the beneficiaries of the trust. Like, you shouldn't even consider that as an option, anybody who would even dream of stealing from the trust. So if you're thinking about your potential people of who might serve as a trustee, take anyone off the list who would even dream of self-dealing. And I know that seems obvious, but you'd be surprised. We have clients who come in and say, I'm thinking about listing my son as the trustee if something happens to me. He's been a little down on his luck, and I think this might give him something to do. They say this with a straight face. That's a terrible idea, because that son who has a hard time keeping down a job would not make a good trustee, because he has a financial incentive to help himself to the trust assets. So you need to make sure that your trustee has no financial incentive and would not be interested in taking from the trust. And by the way, in legalese, we call that self-dealing. The trustee may not self-deal. They cannot do anything that would benefit himself or herself. I think other important considerations are sort of skills in making investments and things like that. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes we have a trustee who says, you know what, I don't understand why the beneficiaries are so mad at me. Yeah, there was $1 million that came in, and I put it in a checking account, and it's all still there. What are they so upset about? Well, that's not enough. That trustee has really not done a good job in that example, because a checking account is not a good place to park $1 million. And in our law, we say that's not what a prudent investor would do. And that's what we call it, the prudent investor rule. A prudent investor would not just park $1 million in a checking account, because that checking account does not have FDIC insurance above about $250,000. And plus, you're not getting any return on that investment, or very little. So, a trustee that has no skill or experience in investment decisions really probably isn't a good trustee. Another thing to be thinking of is that trustee owes fiduciary duties to the beneficiary. And that sort of means that they need to get along with the beneficiary of the trust. Since the trustee is responsible for making those distributions, we really need to make sure that they have a positive relationship. So you don't want to name the son that hates the other son as your trustee because his trusteeship can kind of be used as a weapon. And maybe he decides he doesn't want to make distributions to his brother because of their sour relationship. So you want to pick a trustee that gets along with your beneficiaries because it's going to be that trustee's responsibility to make the distributions to the beneficiary. Now, speaking of distributions to the beneficiary, that's going to be different. What the distributions are to the beneficiary is going to be different depending on what the trust document says. And the trustee has to be a rule follower because they have to follow what the document, what the trust agreement says, and where there are gaps in that trust agreement, they have to follow what the default law says. And if they're unsure about that, maybe they don't have experience being a trustee before, that's okay, but they need to feel comfortable going to an attorney to make sure that they're pointed in the right direction. So when we come to the rules for distribution, the most important thing is the trustee follows what the trust document states. So for example, the trust document might state that distributions should be made by the trustee for the benefit of the beneficiary for their health, education, maintenance, and support. We call that the HEMS standard. That's very, very common. And so that's a discretionary standard. And so you need to trust your trustee to be able to use good discretion for the benefit of that beneficiary for that HEMS standard. Sometimes the trust document instead will have like a set dollar amount per month or per year or whatever the person who established the trust wanted. And again, you need to trust that that trustee will be responsible enough to make the distributions exactly like the trust document says. So again, let me just recap what the responsibility and role of a trustee is. The trustee is the person named in the trust to manage the assets for the benefit of the beneficiary. Now, oftentimes that trustee is the person who established the trust initially, and then if something happened to that person, the successor trustee would take over that trustee responsibility. Then the trustee responsibilities will be to make sure that all the bills are paid as required in the trust document, and then invest the assets of the trust, and then also to make distributions pursuant to that trust document to the beneficiary. I hope you found this video helpful. I'm going to do a couple of other videos about a couple of other important roles about the beneficiary and the set lore of a trust, and I hope you'll check those out. If we can answer any other questions for you, look us up in the information below. Again, my name's Isaac Schutt. I'm an estate planning attorney licensed both in Texas and in Wyoming.